Hey everyone, welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Michael Regan, along with Kathryn Peterson, and we're here to break down another tactical topic today. This one involving an analogy of farming and hunting. We'll dig into it in just a moment, but before we do, let me bring into the mix my friend and fabulous co-host, Kathryn. How are you today?
Good, thank you. I'm curious about this topic because you are an expert in this. I know you've been talking a lot about it. So we'll give us a little preview and then we'll dive right in.
Yeah, you want to know some irony? I do not farm and I do not hunt. So this is going to be really interesting how I become an expert in this topic, but we'll see pretty quickly. It's an analogy, not an actual. So those of you out there listening who are thinking, "Oh man, Michael's going to put on some Wranglers and some boots and get out there and do some farming, or pick up his rifle and go out and do some hunting." Yeah, that's not exactly where we'll go today, but we may play off of a couple of things we can learn from our audience out there who might have some expertise in farming and
Yeah.
hunting. And if we can and apply them to the way that we operate our businesses, I think it might help us see things from a different angle. And that's always my job as a coach. Somebody will ask, "Hey, what's your number one job?" And I guess you can answer that a lot of different ways depending upon your audience. But me personally, I think a coach's number one job is their ability to help their client break down the game film, to help them see what they can't see because they were active in the game. They were active in that moment. And so their adrenaline was rushing, their emotions were high, their energy was up, and they were playing. But I'm on the sideline taking notes saying, "Okay, I see this. I see this now. Let's go back and review the game film so you can see what I saw." And if I can
Mhm.
help you see things from the outside perspective, more often than not, because I tend to get to work with really smart, talented people, I don't even really have to direct them as much as get them to slow down and review it. And all of a sudden they'll tell me, "Oh, I see it now. Yeah, I'm talking too much. Oh, I see it now. It wasn't what I said, it was how I said it." Things like that. And so my hope today with this is that we give you an opportunity to get an outside perspective. And with that perspective, maybe come back to your business and attack it a little bit differently as you head into the winter season. So I'm ready when you are, Kathryn.
Okay, so first describe the methodology of a hunter versus a farmer. So kind of give us what these things actually might mean.
Yeah. So if you know folks who are farmers, think about their methodology. They have to annually plan. They literally have to be annual planners because everything in the cycle of their business model depends upon all four seasons, and they have to have a strategy for all four seasons. There's no way to be successful as a farmer if you're winging it. I mean, it's all in the prep. Now, once the prep is established, I think the methodology of the farmer shifts into a very, I guess, as you and I would say from simple focus planning, they really embrace the disciplines. Like they would love reading Atomic Habits because they would say, "Oh, yeah, that's how I think already. That's my methodology." It's all about embracing small changes each day. So as they go out to these
Mhm.
vast fields, whether it's a garden or a full on, hundreds of acre farm with massive equipment, they've got to do small things every day that ultimately have a massive impact on the crop they're going to yield at the right time of the year. And all of that is going to depend on several things they do control, a few things they influence, and a few things they don't control at all, like how much
Mhm.
rainfall they might get or what the temperature is that year. So the methodology of a farmer is really worth digging into. We'll unpack that a little bit more, but let's distinguish it from a hunter. A
Mhm.
hunter, um, instead of managing, a physical space within a annual calendar, might be looking at it more seasonally. They're looking at it through the lens of, okay, what season is it for what type of hunting either is allowed, depending on the type of
Mhm.
property they're on, or where they're going to go, because certain hunting is really thriving in certain areas of our country or our world that they have to go to. So there's a trip involved, and there's a bunch of prepping and planning for that. That's different than the farmer. This is more like, what do I need to bring? What's all the gear? What's all the tools of my trade? If I'm successful, how do I get this animal back? What do I do to process it? All these things. So the methodology of these two is a little bit different, and it's really important to understand that both are really important to their success. So let's unpack those a little bit more as we go.
That's interesting. And I want to bring out for everybody that Michael is in hunter green today, and I should have worn my orange, but I didn't. So
We tried that a
we'll
few
have to.
episodes ago, and we both ended up in orange, and that was
That's right. So
happy Halloween. Who knows? Yeah.
right, exactly. So then who tends to gravitate towards farming? Who tends to gravitate towards hunting? Kind of explain those personalities a little bit.
Yeah, I think you are on the right track. I think personality plays a big part in that because if you think about the type of work that a hunter has to do, they have to have an unbelievable level of methodology that translates into the mundane. They've really got to embrace the
Mhm.
mundane and not get bored and not get tired and not give up, which means maybe like a runner, if we were going to draw a comparison to something that maybe those of
Mhm.
us know. If you're a distance runner, at some point, there's no way to avoid the fact that you got to put in the miles. You
Mhm.
got to get out and put in the miles. And some miles are flat, some miles are hilly. Some days are sunny, some days are rainy. You got to put in the miles. There's just no way to avoid it. The miles are there. So when you think about who gravitates toward running, they might be of a similar personality to someone who would gravitate toward farming. There are other personality nuances that would play into that, but let's contrast them with hunting for a moment, just so we can start to see the poles, and then we can decide where the shades of gray are. The hunter is an adrenaline junkie. They love, it's the kill. They want to, be able to bag whatever animal they've set out for them. And let's all presume in this analogy, as I want to remind us over and over again, that this is not someone who's killing for harm. This is someone who really sees this as a legitimate sport that's rooted in a history of providing protein for their family. I mean, that's really what this is all about. And so this person is adrenalized by that opportunity. So maybe if we stay with the running, this is more like a sprinter. This is someone who's going to
Mhm.
make, really, really short, quick dashes toward the result they're going to get. You could argue that both are runners, both are going to end up with food in this analogy, farming
Right.
and hunting, but the way in which they get it is really radically different. And so I think personality, as you
Mm.
said in the setup, plays into, well, who's going to gravitate toward farming and who's going to gravitate toward hunting. There's no hard and fast rules to that, and we'll find out maybe in a little bit that there's even some common denominators among those two, but I just wanted to start off with the distinctions.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I'm imagining all sorts of things we can talk about. So I actually, this is a topic I'm getting more and more excited about it the
You,
more we talk about it.
you're more of the audience on this one. I love it.
I know, I like it. So tell me when farming might be a good strategy.
Okay, so if you think about this through the lens of let's be rural for a moment. Let's pretend, we're back in Nebraska and lots of hunting and farming is going on. So this is just
Yes.
part of the common culture there. Nobody's making a special trip. This is just how we live. So when is it a good strategy? Um, Farming is going to be a really good strategy when you think about the type of crop that you're capable of producing. So, in my setup, if we're in Nebraska, you might have access to things like corn, soybeans, maybe some wheat, depending on what part of the state you're in, and other fruits and vegetables. So there's going to be lots of hardier fruits, we're not talking delicate ones. These are going to have to be and vegetables. A lot of vegetables that are going to perhaps even survive in some difficult weather extremes because they've got to be able to do that. But when you look at those types of crops, you're looking at a certain type of nutrition. So when you think about the strategy, nutrition probably drove a lot of that originally. As time went on and farming became more of a business in which we're now sourcing those crops for sale, part of the strategy could be where is the need in the food chain for the types of crops that you're going to grow. So you're going to
Mhm.
pick things based on Oh, well, if corn's being used for a lot more than just human consumption, if it's going to be used for ethanol, for example, well, the price of corn might dictate that your strategy is going to shift to a heck of a lot more corn. So your strategy as a farmer is going to be dictated by, probably one of those two things. What's either the need that we have or the opportunity to sell at a decent price? Because at the end of the day, um, farms are very expensive to operate, and you've got to be able to produce a yield that is profitable. The hunter is a little bit different than the farmer when it comes to strategy, because some of that may be based on the region that they're in. So again, we'll go back to the origin. A lot of this stuff was very regionalized until again we became modern and we could fly to a hunting trip and do all kinds of much easier access things. But originally it was what type of opportunities were around you, and where could you take advantage of those in order to provide protein for your family, and later again to sell that to the butchers and the grocers and all the places that stuff would go. And so large hunting became a little bit more blurred with farming, and that now we'd set up cattle ranches. Well, that's kind of a hybrid between the two. You're not really hunting for those anymore. They're just in the ranch. And then there's other animals that might be included, whether those are, pigs, or those are birds, or those are whatever's going to chickens, whatever you got. So hunting has certainly evolved as a strategy, but I think you can see the parallel lines there if we can bring this into an entrepreneurial lens. So let's look at this through business as well. So, before I used a running analogy, now let's use a business one. If if in farming, in your business, we were to draw a parallel, we would say, okay, well, if you've got a certain field, which might be in business, your sphere of influence, your audience, your opportunity zone, where you could, in
Mhm.
fact, really grow your business, you have to look at that and say, okay, well, what's the real need here? If I'm going to grow, if I'm going to pick a crop to grow, well, in business, if I'm going to open a business, where does the market have a need where I could successfully operate that business at a decent yield? How much competition is there for that business? What are the risk factors for that business? Just like a farmer has to do. So if you think about the strategy of that, they could be similar. The hunter, on the other hand, like a business owner, could be more targeted. Like, hey, I don't know that I'm going to shift my whole business around this. We might add a product line or a partnership and really go after a segment of the market,
Mhm.
because we see a short-term opportunity to really be to thrive in this. But this may not be what we do all the time. This might be what we do occasionally. So in a business model, let's say you operate a functional business, but you occasionally host events. So
Mhm.
your functional business, and we'll use yours, Kathryn, because I think this will make it easier for all of us to play along. You might be on a regular basis in real estate, helping people secure the financing they need to purchase the homes or the businesses they're going to buy. But occasionally, you might host events, and they could be educational events where you're going to
Mhm.
teach a class. Well, that'd be a little bit more like a hunter. You're looking for a very specific audience who wants to learn about this topic that you're passionate about. You're going to
Mhm.
set it all up so that you can bring them the results they need. So the strategy of these two is going to drive some of the execution that's going to follow. And I think it's important to see the benefits of both.
Yeah, another example I thought of using almost the same thing, but a little different is for me, like farming might be doing a mortgage one-on-one class that might bring in some newer agents who probably won't necessarily produce anything for a few years, but it's sowing the seeds for that future stuff in 2 years, 3 years to kind of grow that relationship. Versus in my like view, hunting might be great. I have a home buyer one-on-one class that we're going to get some people and they might all buy in the next 6 months. So that, or someone walks into the office, they're already under contract. You have to switch to hunting mode at that point. So I think those are kind of two things I was thinking about as you were
So
talking about them.
So play out your example. Think about the tools you need to do those
Mm-hmm.
things. I mean, there's certain tools that a hunter needs, certain
Mm-hmm.
tools that a farmer needs. And we don't have to get too deep in the weeds of those practices. But in your world, I'm imagining the presentation would have perhaps some common denominators, but probably a lot of unique things you'd be doing for one audience versus the other. how would you how would you take that parallel when you think about the tools that the farmer and the hunter might distinguish? How would you distinguish the tools you might need depending upon the audience you're going to face? What are some of the things that you would say, "Oh, I would need this for this group, but I need something different for that group"?
Yeah, I think for the farmer, you have to have a system to stay in touch with people for a long period of time and a long-term strategy for those people. And okay, great, I'm going to hit them every month. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to do this, do that for a long period of time would be, I would say, a tool is that system that's in place. And versus if somebody comes in, I have to have my scripts ready of, okay, great. What information do you need from me to move ahead? Or, hey, here's all the numbers that we have prepared. What questions do you have? Can we move ahead with this? So I think it's more in the scripting of a hunter, I would say would be a tool that is kind of the weapon, let's call it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so let's play this forward. Someone might be saying, okay, you're drawing distinctions between hunting and farming, and therefore, in my business, you're trying to draw some distinction between one strategy or another.
Mhm.
But why would someone want to balance those? Because the way you were describing it, there's a little bit of harmony between the two. You do a little of this,
Yeah.
do a little of that. So let's learn from. Let's go back to Nebraska again. A lot of our friends back there, near the farm that our family owns, and we have a farmer who operates. They do a little bit of both. I mean, if you look really
Yeah.
closely, a lot of times our farmer is often the weekend warrior on a hunting trip. That's not unusual. So why would someone blend that strategy? Bring that back to business. Why is it, I don't know, a good idea to find a way to blend those and maybe balance them out? Why as a business owner do you need a little bit of farming and a little bit of hunting?
I think if you were wanting to have a business that only stayed open for 6 months, hunting might be good. Like, yeah, you'll have protein, but hunting season is only in the fall. Then what are you going to do? So, versus a farmer, I think is a long term business strategy to say, okay, even in those off times, I'm going to still have business because I've sowed these seeds of business that I can. I'm really going to dive into the analogy here and say you can those damn vegetables and you're going to
Fruits
have,
too.
yeah, that's right. So you're going to have stuff over time to help
Mm.
sustain the business. So I think there's a little bit of both. Like there's a time when you have business staring at it, at you in the face, and you have to take advantage of that moment that you might not see that elk again, and you've got to shoot. So, versus, hey, what am I doing every day to build my business for the long term? Versus if somebody walks in my office, it's ready to go. What do I need to do?
Yeah, you're on the right track, and I hope our audience isn't too lost on the analogy and maybe not seeing the obvious, which is, in business, a blend of both is really an ideal scenario for most entrepreneurial business owners. So go back to Kathryn's example. If you've got this farming strategy, a keep in touch campaign, you described, maybe regular communication with that person, whether that's a call, whether that's a text, whether it's a postcard, whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's a pop by. I mean, these are all examples of things in the farming analogy that you can be doing with a relationship that you're trying to build. So that relationship could be a customer, that relationship could be a partner, that relationship could be someone who's a strategic alliance, but in whatever area you're trying to grow that relationship, farming is a really good methodology for some aspects of that because it allows you to, um, as you just described, to not only take advantage of a harvest season when that comes, but in your analogy of even, properly processing and storing those fruits and vegetables in the canning or, that step in there. That's also true with relationships. It's equity. If you think about it, sometimes we have an opportunity to really invest in a relationship, but the time in which we're going to reciprocate that investment might come later, and so we have to be able to, in some way, shape, or form, preserve the height of that relationship so it's just as good, maybe
Mhm.
sometimes even better, when there's a little bit of space there. So thinking through what we learn from a farmer is different than in our business when we think through a hunter. And hunting is also really fun, and it's a nice way to break up the monotony of farming so that you're not always in the same routines. And although those change season to season, they can sometimes on a day-to-day basis feel like, say, the calendar says it's a different day, feels like I'm doing the same dang thing.
Mhm.
Hunting allows you to mix in some activities in your business, and what you're very targeted. You're very specific. You're going to bring certain tools and certain gear for a certain creature that you're hunting for. And in business, you might realize there's a certain relationship that you're hunting for that's going to be a lot more intentional, and therefore maybe the pace of that is going to be higher and the intensity is going to be stronger because it's really important for you in this scenario to build that relationship quickly. And so blending those two as a business owner gives you access to both. And I think that would be the takeaway I would have as we look for both of those. And hopefully our audience is gathering the idea that all we're looking for here is, what can we learn from these folks that,
Mhm.
hunter gatherers and farmers have been around for, I don't know, a few thousand years in our human culture. I want to learn as much as I can from, well, how have those professions lasted for thousands of years, and what can I learn from them in my business that I hope can last as well?
And I think a lot of times we do get caught up in that instant gratification. And I think it's good to think through, okay, where can I be a farmer? I realize this may not yield business for a while, but I know it's going to pay off eventually. What can I do today that will benefit me in 9 months, 6 months? And we've asked that question a lot in coaching sessions
Yeah.
too, of what seeds can I plant today that will change my business in a year? And I think that's a good thing to think through with your own business, no matter what it is what can I do today that'll plant a seed that can grow over time?
So you've used that phrase a couple of times. So let me just grab it because I think it's really interesting one. If that for the audience is helpful to think about seed planting, think about just like the farmer. What type of soil will that be in? What do you need to do to prep that soil? Because it may need some nutrients. It may need some tilling. It may need some water. I mean, there's just lots of things that may need to be prepared for that seed to germinate and flourish. What type of weather patterns are we planting the seed in? Because certain crops will grow great, but we're not growing sugar cane in Nebraska. That's not going to work out very well. And we're probably not growing a lot of corn and wheat in Florida, by the way. I mean, it's just there's a reason these things get regionalized. So knowing, where you are in terms of weather. So in your business, if planting those seeds and seeing the long-term benefit of those resonates with you, as Kathryn just described, make sure that part of your prep is thinking through, okay, what kind of soil am I planting these in? What kind of weather do I have? And how committed am I to now nurture this plant as it germinates and sprouts up, but might not be nearly ready to harvest for a long time, and to not be too quick. Because harvesting is a really delicate art. You want to do it at the right time, and farmers work very hard to get the highest yield out of their crop because it can be the difference between a make or break year. And I think the same is true in our relationships. If you go too quickly for the harvest, you sometimes don't end up with what you thought or hoped you were going to get. And if you wait too long, that can have some
Mhm.
consequences as well. So I love that you kept coming back to the sowing seeds, and I think that's a good way for people to think about their business.
And I'd also say that at the same time, you should think through it, but also sometimes you plant a seed that doesn't work out, and that's okay. And you may not know that for a little bit. But because you have more space, it's not if I don't, get this one thing like a hunter, it's over. You have some time to do a little bit of experimentation and say, okay, I'm going to plant 5 seeds and we'll see what works. I know that they're all very viable, but that's okay too. So I think it's just kind of getting stuff in the ground and getting
Okay,
stuff started.
that's really intuitive of you, because if you've really ever talked to farmers and you've really ever been in their world, they will do experimentation just like you described. And they
Mhm.
will, you know, carve out a little section of their farm, maybe a few acres, that's just going to be for testing crops. They're just going to see how, what they're able to do. And the whole purpose of it is just what you said, to just try it out and see what's possible so they can learn from that and then decide, okay, is this something I really want to go full, put all my energy into? Or is this something that, it was just a creative outlet. I just
Mhm.
wanted to see if I could, you know, grow some tomatoes this year, but I don't want to be a tomato farmer.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. Well, I think this has been a great episode for people to think on, journal on, think in your own business about where you can do some farming and where you can do some hunting and your skills in each one of those sets. Anything else to add, Michael, before we close this one out?
Yeah. So all I would ask our audience to do, because you're probably listening to this somewhere in the latter half of 2024, if you're hearing it near our drop date, and if you're listening to it in the future, the application of this will still be real. And that is, when you're considering this analogy, my encouragement would be to recognize that in either case, whether your personality is drawn more to farming or your personality is drawn more to hunting, finding a way to blend those activities tends to produce the most consistent yield. And so, if that's not a skill set that you currently have, it might be time to invest in some learning, invest in, developing that skill. Find somebody who takes you on a hunting trip and you'll learn how to hunt well. In business, that might be someone who's really good at sales and takes you out and teaches you how to connect better with a new audience, and vice versa. If you're a hunter by nature, you're just an adrenaline junkie, you love hunting for new business, but you're not really great at setting up, as Kathryn said, those systems that are designed to produce consistent follow-up. Maybe find somebody who's got some experience with that, who could help you design some systems that work for you. And but either way, I hope what you take away from this is, don't be polarized. We started that way just so I could draw some distinction, but try to find the common ground between the two, because this isn't a hunter versus a farmer. This is, what can we learn from both? And I think as an entrepreneur, you'll recognize that this analogy applies to your business on both sides of this coin. So learn to embrace the other side of the coin.
Yeah, that's great. Good advice. All right. Well, with that, we're going to close out this episode of Building Bigger Lives. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope that you learned something from this episode. Please find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please like and share. Let us know your thoughts. And thanks again for listening.